Last year, James Conner finished as the RB15. He scored 15.9 points per game, which was more than Breece Hall, more than Bucky Irving, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Devonta Smith, and even Terry McLaurin, just barely. So he was probably a pretty impactful dynasty asset, right? Well, I had James Conner on a few dynasty teams last year, and I know that one in particular won the championship. I won the Dunder Mifflin Dynasty League, which is a 12-team Superflex PPR Start 10 league. My team, Lazy Scranton, went 9-5 and got into the playoffs as the 3 seed. So not a super team at all, but I did manage to win my 3 playoff matchups, including the final where my opponent, the 1 seed, had a bit of a rough week. I won by almost 60 points, despite James Conner putting up just 2.8 in week 17. So I was curious, across my 12 total wins for the season, how much did having James Conner really help me? Well, what I found out was actually pretty interesting. If I removed James Conner from my lineup entirely and just left that roster spot completely empty, I still would have won 11 of those 12 games. And that includes weeks 14, 15, and 16, where James Conner scored 22, 30, and 26 points. The only matchup I actually would have lost was week 6, where James Conner only scored 6.6 PPR points. And if I replaced him with a running back that scored just 0.2 points, so 1 carry for 2 yards, I actually would have won that matchup too. Now, the takeaway here isn't that James Conner is actually overrated. On the contrary, he was probably one of the more cost-effective bets you could make on an older player last season. He paid off in a big way. The takeaway is that a single player, even one that's top 15 at their position, has less of an impact on your chances of winning than you might initially think. And maybe you're thinking, Paul, this is just anecdotal evidence. Your one league doesn't tell us anything about how impactful James Conner actually was in Dynasty last season. Well, that's true. It is an anecdote. However, research by Adiko, who you might remember from the strategy video a few weeks ago, does actually support my findings here. Specifically, he found that most fantasy matchups are not close, even in the fantasy playoffs. Now, we're going to take a close look at Adiko's findings and get into the true dynasty implications of those findings, which I promise will not involve any more negativity about James Conner's fantasy impact. However, before we do, I'd like to remind you, if you're enjoying this video so far, you can hit the subscribe button absolutely free, and it'll make my day. So just something to think about there. This is what Adiko found when he conducted a study involving roughly 900 Superflex Dynasty leagues back in 2022. And there's a lot going on with this chart, so let's just take a second to get our bearings. Adiko here is documenting the point differential between teams in different sections of the season. Point differential here meaning the winning score minus the losing score in any given matchup. So we have weeks along the top. We have a total column. We have weeks 1 through 14, weeks 15 through 17, and the individual playoff weeks as well. Below that, we have the average point differential of the matchups in each of those categories. And then we have the median point differential, which if you didn't take statistics 101, the median is just the middle value in a data set. Like if you listed all of the point differentials from smallest to greatest, the one right in the middle would be the median. The good thing about a median is that it does a better job of accounting for outliers than average does, so it is helpful to include. Under the median, we have the total number of matchups that were included in this study, which is almost 79,000 fantasy matchups in total, 74,000 of which were in the regular season. So hopefully that's a large enough sample size for you, certainly larger than my one singular dynasty league. Under those rows, we have these min-max numbers and all of these percentages showing what percentage of matchups fell into any given point differential range. For example, 7.97% of regular season matchups finished with a point differential between 20 and 25 points. So that's how you read the chart, and you can feel free to pause the video if you want to take a closer look at it. I'm going to draw your attention to a few specific data points here. First, notice that the average point differential across all matchups in the data set was 35 points. That means if you gave the average losing team in this sample an extra Lamar Jackson, they still would have lost. And that actually holds true of the median as well, which is 29.5. So it's a little bit smaller because it's doing a better job of accounting for blowouts that are going to be on the far end of the spectrum. But still, the typical matchup was decided by nearly 30 points, even when you just look at the median. Second, if we combine the 0 to 5 and 5 to 10 rows, we can see that only about 18% of regular season matchups had a point differential under 10. And playoff matchups are only slightly higher at about 20%. So this isn't just a matter of bad teams getting blown out and skewing the averages in the regular season. Even when it's just the league's best teams in the fantasy playoffs, we see similar results. These matchups just aren't that close. And finally, according to this data, the typical regular season matchup is more likely to be decided by over 45 points than 15 or fewer points. And even in the playoffs, there is a 70% chance that your matchup is going to be decided by at least 15 points. Now, I know we all have those crazy matchups that come down to the wire and end up being decided by a fraction of a point. Of course, those happen. We're talking about averages here, but those razor thin matchups probably feel more common than they actually are because they're exciting and they're memorable and they loom large in our minds when we think back on the fantasy season. But the truth is they're just not happening that often. So what's the point of all this? I'm telling you that the average fantasy matchup isn't close. Why should you care? And what does it have to do with James Conner? Well, I've got two quick takeaways for you. The first is in fantasy football, 2 nickels are never worth a dime. Scott Barrett said this in his 2021 article, Upside Wins Championships, which, among other things, was about the disproportionate impact that superstar players have on wins and losses. It's a really good evergreen type of article. I'll put a link in the description if you want to go check that out. But in Dynasty, the most expensive assets are the ones that are most likely to provide you with true difference-making production, league-winning production. And unlike redraft, you have the chance to benefit from players like Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, or Brock Bowers for multiple seasons, which can compound the impact of a single trade exponentially. You want to be getting the best player in a Dynasty trade whenever possible. And if you can ever get a blue chip asset for fair market value, you should probably do it, because a dime is always better than 2 nickels. By way of example, this trade actually went down in one of my leagues this morning. Justin Jefferson was acquired for A.J. Brown, Marvin Mims, Tyjae Spears, and Jackson Dart. Now, this isn't some kind of flex. I'm not involved in either side of this trade. It just happened this morning. I thought it fit with the video, so I'm throwing it in there. But I think this is a clear and obvious win for the Justin Jefferson side. First of all, I think value-wise, the pieces on the right just don't add up to Justin Jefferson. But even if they did, I would still want the Jefferson side of this trade because it's a lot easier to replace a Marvin Mims, a Tyjae Spears, a Jackson Dart type of asset than it is to replace a Justin Jefferson, 26-year-old wide receiver, top 3 redraft pick with the potential to give you multiple difference-making seasons. So the second takeaway here really goes hand in hand with the last point. You don't want to be overly concerned about your roster depth. I cannot tell you how often I hear some version of, I can't trade player X because I'm contending. Unless player X is Bijan Robinson, that's probably just not true. Remember my example from the top of the video. I could have started my grandmother instead of James Conner at RB2 for the entire season, and it only would have flipped a single matchup. I still would have won the first round of the playoffs, the second round, the finals. It did not matter. And when you trade away a player, you're not actually replacing them with a 0. You aren't actually going to leave that roster spot empty. You're going to start a replacement player, someone that you have on your bench or someone you can acquire at a reduced cost. So if James Conner had gone down with an injury in week 1 or simply ceased to exist, I would not be losing 15.9 points per game. I had Jalen Warren on the bench, who scored 8.7 points per game. So right there, the deficit has been cut to just 7 points per game. But you can pretty much always find a 9 or a 10 points per game player in a pinch at a very low cost. Even if you're in a deeper league where the waiver wire doesn't really have any plug and play options, think about who you could trade a 3rd or even a 4th round rookie pick for, right? What does it cost to go and get Adam Thielen or Zach Ertz or Wan'Dale Robinson? Like, think last year, Kareem Hunt and Austin Eckler, those guys both scored like 11 points per game and they could be had for pretty much nothing. So just to sum everything up, most fantasy matchups aren't going to be close. And you're probably overrating the impact that any non-elite asset is having on your odds of winning a championship. So you shouldn't be overly concerned by a lack of depth, and you should be willing to trade away non-elite assets, even ones in your starting lineup, for either premium draft capital. I didn't really talk about that, but like if you're getting future first round picks or you're getting a package of rookie picks, it doesn't matter that you're losing that production in your starting lineup. You can backfill it later with a lot of different options, and you should just take the win now. Or you should be willing to trade for true difference makers when you have the opportunity to consolidate multiple assets. Anyway, that's going to do it for today, guys. As always, thank you for watching the video. Thank you for supporting the channel. If you enjoy my Dynasty content and you want to see more in the future, please hit that subscribe button. It really goes a long way. And if you want even more Dynasty content from me, consider becoming a YouTube member by hitting the join button under this video or the link in the description. It's going to get you access to my Dynasty rankings, weekly members-only live streams here on YouTube, and private channels in the Pure Potential Discord, where I talk about Dynasty all day long. I'll be back soon with another Dynasty video. Hopefully, I'll see you then.